Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 110, Reunion with the Master, Part 1. I said I was sorry. Cheer up already. I'm not mad or anything, I guess I'm a little mad that you didn't tell me sooner. Tiana was still sulking after they conquered Blazing Bird Peak and returned to Fisherman. To shake off the heat and exhaustion that came with exploring Blazing Bird Peak, she created ice with magic and placed it in her mug, chugging down her drink. Nick was awkwardly trying to calm her, but to no avail. I told you, next time, we're going to a labyrinth that's more compatible with us and... Yes, we're going somewhere that's more suitable for us, but that's not it. Tiana was in a horrendous mood, but there was a certain sharpness in her eyes. What do you mean? It's important to choose labyrinths we're strong enough to conquer and are compatible with us. I know that. But whether or not we can always do so is another question entirely. That's true. It was important to avoid labyrinths that seemed too difficult, but it was also important to be ready to be able to go down paths that were unavoidable. A steady source of income was important to make a living, but adventurers had to be adventurous. If they lost their ambition and became complacent, they might have found themselves unable to maintain their present condition and weakening. Tiana had not been an adventurer for long, but she instinctively understood this. But what do you want to do? That place had a lot of fire magic energy and flying monsters. It's not like there's nothing I can do. Magic barriers become weaker the wider they are, so a small one would be stronger. So you're going to make a smaller barrier? Yes. Then. Nick looked at Bond, who puffed out his chest and smiled. I knew you would come to me. It would have been a lot easier if you just relied on me back in the labyrinth as well. You're absolutely right, but we're looking for a more objective comment. When you say that with such a straight face, it is embarrassing, you know. Bond cleared his throat as a way to try to disguise his blushing face. When you used union, that barrier would not break. In fact, the moment the great blazing bird entered it, it would be severely weakened. That makes sense. I know that, but if I can do that on my own, I could do more in that labyrinth, and even help the others. But can you do it? It's not impossible. Just very difficult. At any rate, first-class sorcerers have to be able to overcome all kinds of topographical disadvantages. You could even say that magic was made to be relied on in those situations. Sounds like you're saying you'll be fine if you improve your abilities. Nick, you always make sure to prepare as much as possible to ensure we win, and I think that's the right thing to do, but you never know when something unexpected might happen. I think it's necessary to have a trump card that can completely flip over the board if we're at a disadvantage. Isn't that exactly what Union is? Well then, was the success of Union a sure thing the other day? If our timing wasn't right, we would have died. Nick, or rather, everyone thought back to when they were attacked by White Mask. In the end, White Mask was completely defeated, but that was due to Olivia's help. If things had gone just a little bit awry, they could have all died there. I think Tiana is right, said Karen with a serious expression as she crossed her arms. It'd be one thing if we were just working normally. But I want to get stronger. I don't want to just buy time when someone like White Mask comes along. Yes, but you shouldn't be too hasty. It's not like you can just become stronger all of a sudden. I don't want to hear that from you, Nick. You. Nick had recently learned a new technique very quickly, stepping. It also took very little time for him to be able to use it in actual combat. This was exactly the meaning behind Karen's stare. What do you think, Sam? I don't think they're wrong, but I agree that being too hasty isn't good. How about setting a specific goal before starting training? I see. It's always good to have a clear objective when trying to learn something or obtaining a new skill. After that, you should think about how you're going to train and establish a concrete plan. You were lucky that you just happened to come across someone that became your master, Nick. I think it's good to find someone to guide you any time you want to learn something. said Sem, and both Tiana and Karen looked troubled. Sorcerers reach a dead end when they do their own research, so it's always difficult unless they become an apprentice somewhere. And there aren't that many dragon warriors. I know there's research institutes and schools for magic, but I don't know any other dragon people. The only person I know that might be able to help with that is Olivia. Yeah, she's like a walking encyclopedia, said Sem, and Nick nodded with a bitter smile. But she went away somewhere, mumbled Nick, and everyone nodded. She did save them, but she still had more mysteries and secrets than one could count, so she was not someone survivors could blindly trust. Still, we are relatively strong. I think we could even say we can become high-ranking adventurers. But I don't think we should ignore whatever dangers may be coming. Even if we can safely conquer labyrinths, don't forget your own weakness. Exactly. That's right. Two people unexpectedly interjected. The first voice was a husky voice of an elderly person, but unusually loud. Everyone looked their way with surprised expressions. Who are you? Nick turned around and saw a man and a woman. The man looked past his 50s, but not quite elderly yet. He had darkish skin and silver hair, and carried a staff and wore an old robe. His eyes looked sharp and his gaze was determined. He felt like he belonged somewhere higher than fishermen. The other person was a dragon woman. Her arms were covered in scales, but contrary to Karen, they gave off a charming, blue glow. Her long, slightly wavy hair was the same color, and it was tied with a knitted string. Her character could be felt strongly on her appearance and posture, although not as much as the man standing next to her. Master Bellocchio. Sis. Tiana and Karen mumbled, overcome with surprise. 7 men and women with serious expressions sat at a table in fishermen, survivors, and the other 2 people that just arrived. Tiana seemed to know the man, and Karen, the woman. Both seemed not only strangely nervous, but also quiet. Nick thought about telling them to go away, but figured it would make things awkward, and instead asked them to sit down. It seems like you know 2 of our party members. Is there anything you need with us? Asked Nick with difficulty as he looked at the man, who responded with a light smile. Yes, but there is no need for formalities. I am also just an adventurer. I see. He looked like an adventurer, but his generally refined attitude reminded Nick of a noble. Nick was at a loss about how to deal with a noble, but since he called himself an adventurer, Nick would treat him as such. Tiana, however, looked like she was in a state of panic. She flinched at every movement the man made, and was sweating. First of all, I must apologize for suddenly injecting myself to your conversation. Can I introduce myself? Yes. My name is Bellocchio. I was a teacher in a magic academy in the capital, but circumstances dictated I had to resign. I am currently traveling to expand my horizons and learn more. When Nick heard him mention the magic academy, he realized what was going on. He was Tiana's teacher, although he figured they had a closer relationship of master and pupil. Tiana was becoming increasingly agitated as Bellocchio continued speaking. He continued casually talking, perhaps purposefully pretending not to notice. As you can see, I have some knowledge about magic. Although I spent a lot of time away from the front lines, teaching. And then. The man looked over at the dragon woman sitting next to him, who nodded slightly and spoke. My name is Suisen. I am. The women named Suisen looked at Karen with a stern expression, and Nick suddenly noticed that, much like Tiana, Karen looked incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. Karen's sister. All of the survivors cried out in shock, except for Karen. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 111, Reunion with the Master, Part 2. Karen's older sister. Everyone was surprised, but thought it made sense. Karen. Sis. I've heard you've been through a lot. Go back to the village. If you think you're still too immature, you know that's what you should do. Karen frowned hard at this sudden proposition. That has nothing to do with you. What did you say? I don't get why you're showing up all of a sudden and said that. If you want to go back alone. Said Karen before turning away, something which Suisun did not look too happy about. Everyone around them was confused about this sudden discussion, and Nick stood up. Wait, I don't understand. This is all too sudden. You. Why yes. This is a family matter. I'm going to need you to stay out of it. Be that as it may, Karen is still a member of our party, and the only person that can decide if she wants to quit is her. If anyone else here had the right to make her quit, that would be the leader, me. Can you convince me first? The feeling of enmity turned into bloodlust. The situation was very volatile. Suisun's hands were that of a dragon person, hard, strong, and sharp. She clenched her fists, and was just about to move her arm when Suisun. Bellocchio's voice echoed, and Suisun loosened her fist. I'm sorry Bellocchio. Nick was it? You too. I'm sorry for flaring up. Nick said as he sat back down. Still. You two have completely different origins. Why are you together? Nick said as he looked at both Suisun and Bellocchio. Bellocchio answered with a wry smile. Obviously, because we were both searching for survivors. Neither of us could find our way around Labyrinth City, so it was lucky that we just happened to be looking for the same group of people. Nick decided to continue the discussion from there. It turned out that they had actually visited New Beads first. When they asked about the people they were looking for, they heard they joined a party known as Survivors and started looking for them. Bellocchio smiled as he explained. Tiana, my business here is not much different than Suisun's. So. Do you want me to return to school? Yes, although not a school in this country. The magic empire of Shembad has been looking for people to teach magic. Will you be my assistant? Tiana's face was frozen as she heard something completely unexpected. Bellocchio was not looking to pressure her to make a decision on the spot, so they decided to talk again later. The atmosphere was tense, and it seemed as though Karen and her sister could start brawling at any moment, but Bellocchio stopped Suisun with skill similar to that of an animal tamer. His expression showed that he was used to dealing with hot-blooded younglings as he casually left fishermen. Survivors also left, and gathered in Tiana's apartment. I am so tired. Me too. The two girls put their arms and heads on the table. This is turning into something really confusing for me. Nick got up, poured some water from a jug into 2 cups, and placed them in front of the two girls. Sem and Bon started cleaning the room, not really saying anything. Tiana had the bad habit of leaving trash around. She would make sure to not leave raw garbage lying around, as it would attract dangerous beasts, but would leave packaging and wrappings of books and magic items she bought rolling around her room. It had become a habit to clean Tiana's apartment before starting to talk. Sorry. I don't have the energy to do that today. Said Tiana. It's fine. I guess I'll have to ask. What do you want to do? I'm not going. No way. Karen's answer to Nick's question was a strong no. Don't you two get along? That's not it. I don't think so. Karen tilted her head, seemingly having difficulty putting her thoughts into words. Nick and the others waited for her to speak without rushing her. My sister got married and abandoned our hometown, so it's kind of a problem that she showed up telling me to go back with her. Abandoned your hometown? She eloped with a traveler. She's strong, smart, and beautiful, but she didn't become a warrior or an adventurer. She used to always tell me not to think about those bothersome things. I didn't know she was in the Labyrinth City. So. It's not like she left the village with a specific purpose in mind like you. She always treats me like a kid, even though she does whatever she wants. Like how she's telling me to go back with her now. I see. Nick somehow sympathized with this. He understood Karen's dilemma of not wanting to go back all too well. However, at the same time, he thought such a cold and brusque attitude was not right. He looked over at Sem, who quietly nodded. I think you two should calm down and try to talk again before turning this into a fight. Maybe there's something going on with her that we don't know about, or maybe she's misunderstanding our situation. If there is something that needs to be said, you should say it before you say yes or no. All right. The problem was not solved, but Karen nodded in agreement. Nick felt relieved, and focused his attention on Tiana. What about you, Tiana? I can't just suddenly leave everything and go just because he says so. I really enjoy what I'm currently doing. Tiana whispered with some gloom in her eyes. Nick noticed her refusal was not as resolute as Karen's. So it's not something you want to refuse right away, and want to mull it over? Hey! Tiana stood up and glared at Nick. I'm not complaining or anything, I just want to hear what you have to say. Are you mad? Happy? Confused? What is it? Tiana was going to yell something, but stopped, sat back down, and started speaking. I feel guilty. I guess. Guilty? It's partly my fault that he was expelled in the first place. I still feel guilty about what happened. Tiana was expelled from a school for nobles, and Bellocchio suffered the same fate. This situation was caused by her former fiancé and his lover. As if confirming her own feelings, Tiana revealed that she felt she was responsible, and that her teacher would not have been expelled if she noticed their trap sooner. So you want to atone? I do, but... Tiana stood up and rolled on the ground. While lying face up, she once again started speaking to no one in particular. I don't feel like following Master Bellocchio will be enough to atone. But I also feel like that's just an excuse for me not to go to the Magic Empire. I have all these conflicting ideas in my head. I'm like that sometimes, you know. So, does that mean you two don't want to go? Sem asked directly. Of course. Well, yeah. Said Karen and Tiana with no doubt on their faces. Wait. We need to be sure, if we're going to help. Tiana and Karen opened their eyes wide. Nick? Are you sure? What? Nick had no idea what they were getting at, and both sighed in response. What? Do you remember what you said when we formed this party? And then Nick remembered what he once said. We're not going to interfere with each other's private lives. You're the one who said it, how could you forget? And here I was feeling bad for getting you involved. Yes. Anne. Karen mumbled, before her voice got almost too quiet to hear. I was worried that if I started talking about private problems you'd say it was against the rules. Ah, Nick, you're really mean. Poor Karen. Said Tiana. I think this is a good time to apologize, Nick. Said Sem. How awful. You are a disgrace to all sacred sword holders. What's with all of you? Why are you piling in on it too, Sem and Bond? Said Nick with a sigh while scratching his head with both hands. I'm going to take this opportunity to say that if you find something like a goal in life that takes precedence over this, and you want to willingly quit, I won't stop you. No one ever knows when their adventure party might end. Said Nick in an uncharacteristically plain manner, as everyone else looked at him with solemn expressions. But, if something or someone is forcing you to quit against your will, that's a different story. Adventurers should be free, and I won't accept anyone trying to ruin that. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world. Chapter 112, Reunion with the Master, Part 3. Everyone quietly listened to Nick. He started feeling awkward, turned away, and continued talking, seemingly justifying himself. No, well, sorry for getting all worked up before even confirming any of that. It's fine. Suisun is too forceful, so she had it coming. mumbled Karen, while not looking at Nick. Both seemed awkward and fidgety. That's enough. Stop making the mood turn into something bittersweet. Complained Tiana. I'm not. In any case, what are we going to do exactly? Asked Bond, and Nick responded. We don't really have to do anything. What? If they come to us, we'll put a stop to it, but we shouldn't make things convenient for them. After that. I know. We can lay the groundwork and talk to the employees over at Fisherman. What do you mean by lay the groundwork? Sometimes family or lovers go there to try to get adventurers to quit. Do such a thing really happen? Asked Bond sincerely. It happens occasionally. Some go up to the receptionists' desks to talk about family or love affairs. Coming up with some reason to force the adventurer to leave. There are even guys that are borderline stalkers that go there to try to get female adventurers to leave, because it's dangerous or whatever. Sometimes they stay near the receptionists' desks for hours. Karen and Tiana were visibly creeped out as Nick explained. Really? That's terrible. Well, the receptionists are used to it, so they turn them away, but it's basically trouble we're causing them, so it's probably a good idea to give them a tip. We really do not want the receptionists to get upset. Whispered Bond. What else do we do? Well, if we let ourselves pay too much attention to it, it's just going to put a strain on us. We should continue doing what we are usually doing, like labyrinth exploration. Said Sem, and Nick nodded. That's true, let's keep working. Maybe they'll even change their minds if they see us working hard. Yes. Maybe my master is misunderstanding me, and thinks I just want to live a life free of any hassle. Said Tiana, as she got up from the floor. Alright, let's keep working then. We'll clear the misunderstanding the next time we see them. I'm ready. Tiana loudly slapped her own cheeks. And maybe you'll stop worrying so much once you've decided what course of action you will take, Karen. Mugyu. Said Tiana as she started jiggling Karen's cheeks. I know. Responded Karen as she pushed Tiana away. Afterwards they ended up sleeping, huddled together in Tiana's room. And so, survivors continued their operations like nothing happened. They rested for 3 days, and started preparing for their next adventure. Having that said, Tiana and Karen could not quite get over what happened, and were quieter than usual. They seemed a little stressed. Karen has been staying in Tiana's apartment, has she not? Asked Bond. Yes. She said something about knowing what her sister is like, and that she could very well start following her around to see what she's doing. Tiana is taking a break from dragon races too, because she's been studying magic. How complicated. So is that why we are buying things for them? Nick and Bond were on their way to Tiana's apartment, after buying some things for her and Karen. They brought lightly baked bread and labyrinth chicken for them to eat together. The plan was to cut the bread thinly to go with the labyrinth chicken. They wanted to get there quickly, since it was still warm. Mr. Nick, may I have a word? Ah. That plan was ruined by a sudden intruder. Nick turned around, and saw the man and woman he had previously seen in Fisherman. Bellocchio the sorcerer, and Suason the dragon woman. Are you about to have lunch? Should we meet at another time? No. It's fine. Nick reluctantly responded, as he did not want to continue walking and have them find out where they were going. First of all, we should sit down somewhere. I will treat you to something. No, it's all right. Let's not. You don't need to be so alarmed. I am not going to use something so small to try to push you to listen to what I want. We all have said some harsh words, so I would like to clear the misunderstandings. I'm sure you feel the same way. He was right. He was a good talker, and Nick could see himself nodding to his words very easily. However, the fact that he had a way with words made Nick believe even more so, that he should watch out for him. Just like Sem said, they could not allow these two to disrupt their pace. Alright, but we have things to do, so I can't stay with you for too long. It's fine. Let us go somewhere else then. Surely there was a misunderstanding that could be cleared with an exchange of words, is what Nick thought. But this naive expectation was soon shattered. I see, I see. Nick placed his hand on his forehead, as if he had a headache. In the open terrace of a cafe, Nick did his best not to slovenly lie down with his face on the table. So you know Karen lost her Dragon King orb and went on an eating spree. Meanwhile Tiana wandered into the labyrinth city and got addicted to gambling, and you still want to take them with you? Of course. Naturally. Tell me. How could I not get mad at her? And let her continue on as an adventurer after all that has happened? Bellocchio nodded without breaking his light smile, and Suisun said with her usual angry expression. How did you find all of that out? Bellocchio's smile turned a little bitter as he answered Nick's question. It wasn't that hard. I asked some people in the guild that like to gossip, and gathered information from there. Ah, they were not all bad rumors by the way. In fact, many people seem to have a lot of admiration for what you've been doing. Well, we also heard about someone spending all her money eating in restaurants, someone becoming completely addicted to dragon races, someone indulging in women every night, and lastly someone becoming completely engrossed in the world of idols. Suisun glared at Nick so hard, he could feel it striking him. Well, I know it doesn't sound good, but it's fulfilling for the people doing it. You can say a lot about me and Sem, but those two have done nothing to be ashamed of, and aren't causing trouble for anyone else. That's true. Surprisingly enough, Bellocchio agreed. She always was a proactive student. Not the type to sit back and be content with the status quo, but rather the type to build the environment she wanted by her own hands. I'm sure someone with such a strong spirit is still living as strongly as ever. Then. But, although she left her home, she is still a noble, and not only that, but a very talented sorcerer as well. There is a limit to what she can accomplish as an adventurer. With the right environment, she could do so much more. She could regain her lost honor, or perhaps, become even more prestigious than ever. Nick did not disagree with what Bellocchio was saying. One time, when Nick and Tiana were alone, she told him it was her goal to be a sage, and not to aimlessly continue to be an adventurer. No matter where she stood, she was always aiming upwards and trying to be the best sorcerer she could be. Surely this was what Bellocchio saw as well, and from that point of view, Bellocchio's proposal was beneficial to Tiana. At the very least, there is a limit to being an adventurer here. Am I wrong? Limit? Am I wrong? Ah, but I am not calling being an adventurer a low occupation. But how many people can lead decent lives fighting monsters day after day, trying to stay healthy while putting their bodies at risk? Am I wrong to say that many retire after the strain on their bodies or hearts becomes too much? Yes, that does happen a lot. Nick thought back to Ada. She retired from being an adventurer after her leg was injured, and started working as a guard in taverns. Still, what Bellocchio said next was hard for Nick to overlook. Let us be honest, if Tiana is going to have a successful and prosperous future, she should not continue the transitory and decadent work of an adventurer. Transitory and decadent. There was no lie to that. But on the other hand, Nick was trying to create a party that could, without a shadow of a doubt, make its living on its adventure work. He wanted these people, who felt like they were failures, were expelled, and were deceived, to be able to live their daily lives normally, not having to worry if it would all end the next day. That was the reason Survivors was formed. Nick could not stay quiet as someone basically said, "You're not going to accomplish that anyway." You're right, adventuring isn't something one can do their whole life. Oh, you agree? There's a lot of bastards out there and the monsters are strong. There are a lot of times when we get the short end of the stick. I get how you feel. It's not like I've never thought that Tiana was rotting away here. Then. But why didn't you extend your hand when she was suffering the most? That's... Nick understood how unfair it was for him to say this. He could guess that he was not in a position to do anything. He was not like Tiana, who had little in the way of responsibility outside of the fact that she was born a noble. This was a man who had built his career from the ground up, and he surely faced much more difficulties. Still, the fact remained that the man in front of Nick did not save Tiana. This was a deep cut for Suisun as well. If Suisun or other members of their race had come to Karen's aid quickly when she needed it, she would not be here. Karen would have probably returned to her hometown, just like what Suisun was asking. In the end, this was nothing more than conjecture. In reality, none of that happened. I'm not chastising you for being late, but when Tiana was at her lowest point, she herself chose the path she wanted, and decided to move forward. No one else has the right to tell her what she did was wrong or useless. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 113, Reunion with the Master, Part 4. Nick sat down, trying to compose his breathing after getting worked up. Bellocchio was completely silent, and looked at Nick with a harsh expression. I am not just someone else. I am her master, and I have a responsibility towards her well-being, and her future. But Nick was not willing to back down here. And I'm her friend and leader. I have my responsibilities too. Are you going to say the same thing about Karen too? Suddenly, Suisun was looking at Nick with seething anger in her eyes. Nick had gotten stronger recently, but this penetrating coldness, much different than Karen, sent a chill down his spine. Still, he was not about to back down. Yes, it doesn't matter if you're family. She has the strength to fight, and now, she's even capable of reading and counting. She failed, learned from it, and became a proper adventurer. She's not a baby bird that needs her family to protect her. Her bloodlust was leaking. This time, Bellocchio was showing no signs that he would stop her. They were getting close to a breakdown in negotiations. Perhaps noticing the strange atmosphere around that table, the waitress who intended to approach them backed away, face paled. Nick started thinking. Bellocchio would probably not let loose in public, so I would only have to deal with Suisun. If I can just protect himself just a little while, it should be fine. However, his opponent was someone who was likely even stronger than Karen, so he could not afford to be careless. The air was tense. Suisun's eyes and fingers shook. She was becoming impatient and she was about to make a move. Nick was about to kick the table away when... That's enough. Sis. They heard familiar voices, and stopped. These voices came from the subjects of their discussion. Oh. Tiana and Karen. I'm here too. The remaining members of survivors stood behind the table where Nick and the others were sitting. Nick was about to ask why they were there, but realized something and looked at Bond, who had been silent that whole time. Boo, you three. What a coincidence. I assume you have had lunch already? Bond ignored Nick and did a horrendous job pretending to be innocent as he greeted them. Not yet. I never thought the situation had escalated to the point where a fight was about to start. I've completely lost my appetite. That's right. Both Tiana and Karen had the flames of rage burning deep within their eyes. Bond used telepath to call them. So, they may have overheard the conversation while he was doing so. However, Bellocchio and Suisun saw this as a good opportunity, and each faced the one they were after. Tiana, come with me. It is for your own good. Karen. Come home with me. And their answers soon followed. I don't want to. No. Suisun's bloodlust could still be felt, but Karen and Tiana's glare had the same intensity. The situation had reached a deadlock once again, and Bellocchio let out a heavy sigh. It seems negotiations have broken down. Apparently. Nick responded while playing dumb. Then how about this, Nick? What? In order to gather information, we had to use unavoidable methods. What do you mean? Finding out that you are adventurers was easy, but we had quite a lot of trouble acquiring information beyond that. Ah. Nick could not see his point, and gave a sarcastic, half-hearted response, but what he heard next astonished him. So in order to get inside information, we became adventurers. When we talk about adventurers getting hurt and risking their lives, we did so from experience. Ah. Why you? Nick was shocked, and Bellocchio happily smiled. It was not easy at my age, but thanks to Suason and our other allies, we have reached E rank. Unless I'm mistaken, you are also E rank, correct? What are you getting at? How about we do it the adventurer's way and have a match? In other words, a duel. Or we can make it so whoever reaches D rank first has to adhere to the other's demands. Don't even think about it. All we have to do is to ignore you. Why would we accept a match when we have nothing to gain from it? That is true. Bellocchio started silently thinking. He crossed his arms, and closed his eyes for a while. He was so quiet, it was as though he was meditating. Hey. Ah, that's just something he does. He didn't fall asleep or anything. That's fine, I guess, said Nick with a concerned tone, before Bellocchio's eyes suddenly opened again. Just like we are demanding something from you, we need to prepare an equivalent reward. So. Tiana. Yes, master. I will grant you my secret techniques. If you had graduated and continued to perfect your magic, I would have taught you anyways because of your talent. Of course, this is not part of the fundamentals included in the school curriculum, this is something only my disciples can learn. But. Are you sure about this? Nick and Karen did not seem to understand Tiana's reaction. Ah, I guess you two don't know. What sorcerers learn in academies or in lessons they pay for is essentially just the basics. They don't really get into the various different original styles of magic. But it still feels too good to be true, said Nick, and Karen nodded. Tiana had a complicated expression, after being complimented in this strange situation. There is a general style of sorts that can be learned without joining a specific sect, but it takes quite a bit of time to learn everything. Tiana has mastered many different things for her age. No argument here. But I do not teach the secrets of my school of magic, the Thunderbird style. This is something that cannot be taught to just anyone, no matter how much money they have. It is also not something taught in a classroom environment, but rather something transmitted by serious training under my personal tutelage. So you're saying you'll teach that? Correct. I was going to do so anyway after she quit being an adventurer and followed me. If what he said was true, it was an appropriate reward, perhaps even greater than what he would be getting if he won. Tiana understood this, and nervously gulped. That's enough of a reward for Tiana. But what about you? TCH. Nick said as he turned to Suason, who grimaced hard enough to ruin her beautiful features. Karen, you don't know everything about how to use the dragon bone sword, do you? Karen was taken by surprise, and Suason gasped in a purposefully exaggerated manner. You can only spout out fire, right? That's like a means to bring out the power of our race, but if you think that's all, you're sorely mistaken. Is there more? I'm saying I'll teach you if you win, said Suason with a provocative tone. Karen glared back at her with a harsh expression, but could not hide her interest. Nick. What? Can we do it? Both Tiana and Karen looked at Nick with uncertainty in their eyes. I want to say we shouldn't try to cross this dangerous bridge, but could we really call ourselves adventurers if we ran away here, was the thought going through Nick's mind. Though, it was not just about them being adventurers. It was also about standing against something they were not willing to do. Thus, Nick had no intention of stopping them. If he complained, it would simply be because he lacked faith in his team members, and in the end, he wanted to leave it up to Karen and Tiana. Let's work out the details and make things clear. Here I was thinking it's been a while and yet, you want another duel. You rascals are getting stranger and stranger. Wilma, the manager who stopped by once in a while, said as she sighed. Although she was old, she had a discerning eye and still moved fluidly. The only thing about her that matched her age was her appearance. That day, she was as sharp as ever. When she heard survivors' request, she took them to the conference room in the back. Not only that, but you want to face the Wanderers. Wanderers? Asked Nick, and Bellocchio explained. That is the name of our party, composed of myself, Sueson, and 2 veteran adventurers we hired. I just happened to see them here in this guild, so let me get them. It is rare for people to hire party members. This sort of makeshift party would usually not function very well, Nick thought, before he heard familiar voices. Hey! I haven't seen you here in a while. I heard you've been doing great over at Manhunt. Said a man that looked like a swordsman and a man that looked like a sorcerer. Wait. Marcus and Wiley? The swordsman was Marcus. He had light brown skin, and long black hair tied in the back. His armor and equipment were stylish, making him look refined. Wiley was the sorcerer. His body was long and thin, and he had blonde frizzy hair. This coupled with his worn-out robe made him look boorish. He was a fan of idols, just like Nick. These 2 men were veterans in fishermen. Now that I think about it, you 2 work by helping other parties. We're always here to help. Is what I'd say if we weren't enemies this time. Said Wiley with a shrug. You know each other. Let's begin this already, I have things to do. Said Wilma, and everyone nodded. First, we need to confirm the primary conditions. This is a duel between survivors and wanderers. If wanderers win, those 2 will leave survivors and go along with the 2 from wanderers. Is this correct? Yes, I'll take Karen with me, and Bellocchio will take that lady. Said Sueson, sounding as if it had been decided already. And if survivors win, you 2 will teach them your techniques. What a weird match. Oh well, at least it's simpler than the one with the Steel Tiger crew. Simple for you. But for us, it's very serious. Mumbled Nick, and Wilma snorted in response. Still. This is good. Both parties have the potential to go beyond rank D. I have no complaints. HN. I don't see your point. It's almost time for the estivation period, but something happens just before that. Do you get it? The pre-hibernation meal. Nick responded. Pre-hibernation meal. This was the name given to a certain behavior of monsters that happened before the estivation period. Despite its name, it was not like bears stuffing themselves with food before sleeping through the winter, it simply meant that their activity suddenly exploded, and they became more ferocious. Because of this, some bosses would evolve into a higher-ranked being, much like the ogre Nick and the others faced in the Goblin Forest. Intermediary adventurers could deal with monsters in low-difficulty labyrinths like the Goblin Forest, but it could be a problem when bosses of more difficult labyrinths evolved. During this period before summer, labyrinth exploration required an extra degree of caution. A named monster appeared. The E-rank party that faced it didn't make a dent in it, and they all had to retreat. Where? Thousand Sword Peak. That's good timing. It is, but it's also a problem. Mumbled Tiana when she heard the name Thousand Sword Peak. Isn't that one of the labyrinths we have to conquer to advance to rank D? It is. Said Nick, and Wilma explained further. It's one of the mountains in the 5 Rings mountain range, next to Blazing Bird Peak. I'm assuming you haven't been there yet by the way you're talking. Yes, we just conquered Blazing Bird Peak the other day. I'm a bit worried about the labyrinth itself, but what do you mean a named monster? You defeated the ogre that appeared in the Goblin Forest, didn't you? It's the same thing, a boss that appears regularly evolved into something stronger. We give them names as a way to alert people. There's a special reward given to whoever defeats it. Nick heard Wilma's explanation, and had a question. The boss of Thousand Sword Peak is the Great Ogre. That thing evolved? Yes. It was already on the verge of evolving, from what they said. Its body isn't too big, but it's incredibly agile. I have a proposal for how this match is going to go. Whoever defeats that named monster, wins. That's it, right? Wilma smiled as she took out a piece of paper. In it, were the monster's name, a drawing of its appearance, and the reward for its head. The target is Ushiwaka and the reward is 3 million dinar. Whoever takes it down first wins. How does that sound? Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 114, Reunion with the Master, Part 5. As they worked out the details of the match, their conversation with Wilma was coming to an end. Both parties will begin their conquest of the labyrinth a week from today, early in the morning. The party that defeats the monster at the top, Ashikawa, wins. Only people present here today can participate, no more helpers will be allowed. Use of tools and items is allowed. Fighting between parties is prohibited. Any questions? Isn't it possible that another party defeats it first? Nick asked, and Wilma nodded. On the off chance that it does happen, we'll take responsibility and start over, but it will probably be fine. All the adventurers ranked D and higher were sent to another labyrinth. Are monsters rampaging in some other labyrinth? Yes. According to one of the parties there, it'll probably die down in about 2 weeks. So you see why it's a problem for us that a named monster appeared during this busy period. Your match couldn't have come at a better time. What if we reach the top at the same time? And if we're following the same route, won't we be butting heads the whole time? Asked Tiana. No problem. Thousand Sword Peak has many paths. Maybe you'll bump into each other on the way, but you're not going to be together the whole time. And what about the boss? Obviously, whoever deals the final blow wins. What if we fire magic at the same time and hit it at the same time? Magic? You're not going to take it down with magic. Maybe 2 people will strike it down with swords at the same time, but that's not very likely. If the decision is split, we'll have to start over. Tiana twisted her neck, not understanding what Wilma was saying. Nick had the answer to her question. Magic doesn't work in Thousand Sword Peak. Are there more lightning rods or something? Worse. It's hard to even cast a spell in the first place. I'll explain when we get back. Wait. Tiana looked to be grinding her teeth, and Nick tried to calm her down. Bellocchio then spoke. Tiana. Why yes, master. Just as Bellocchio was about to start speaking, he shook his head. No, forget it. Hum. Rather than answer Tiana, Bellocchio cleared his throat and changed the subject. In any case, this seems to be a difficult labyrinth for sorcerers. Let us all have a clean and fair match. Bellocchio said in an innocuous response. Tiana felt there was some sort of message in there, and quietly said what she had to say. Very well. And master. I won't lose. Bellocchio looked at Tiana and quietly nodded. Although they were on opposite sides, there was still a kind of respect between them. Not too far from them however, it almost felt as though sparks were flying as Suason and Karen glared at each other. Unlike Tiana and her master, the 2 sisters could not wait to start their match. We're not starting yet. So, get ready. You get ready. Humph. Let's leave it that. Go home and start preparing for the match next week. Said Wilma, and everyone left. Survivors gathered once again in Tiana's apartment. Everyone was sitting at the table, except Nick, who was standing. It was the same scene that could be seen every time they were working out a strategy. So Nick. What did you mean when you said magic doesn't work there? It's simple, the whole labyrinth is covered with a magic sealing barrier. Blazing Bird Peak weakens fire magic, but Thousand Sword Peak basically nullifies all magic. Really? Unfortunately, yes. Said Nick, much to Tiana's shock. As the name implied, a magic sealing barrier completely sealed off magic. If even just a bit of magic energy was released from someone's body, it would evaporate before it could actually take the form of magic. It was something that sometimes appeared in ruins or high-level labyrinths. That also means the monsters can't use magic. I guess. Ah. Tiana's shoulders dropped in disappointment. Karen suddenly realized something, and asked Nick with a quizzical expression. Nick. Does that mean my breath won't work either? It doesn't matter if it's spells or techniques characteristic of a certain race, anything that involves releasing magic energy doesn't work. Because of this, only magic that activates by touch and magic that strengthens people will work. That's not fair. So it's all up to you and Sem again. Nick received Tiana's prickly stare with a bitter smile. There was still more. Karen, think about not using the dragon bone sword. HN. I need a sword, even if it doesn't have divine protection. There's swords in the labyrinth. What? For some reason, swords grow out of Thousand Sword Peak. Though, only inside the labyrinth. Everyone looked at Nick with a blank expression. You're making it sound like they grow like apples on a tree. I'm serious. They really do just grow out of the ground. Ah. It seemed Bond remembered something. HN. Do you know anything about this? I know nothing of the name Thousand Sword Peak. But I do recall hearing about a training area that matches your description long ago. Could it be that said training area has turned into a labyrinth? If I remember correctly, this training area should contain weapons that can only be used inside it. It was created as a way to allow people to hone their skills, and not use those weapons for anything else. Yes, it's like that. Karen saw Nick nodding, and the gloom on her face matched Tiana's. So. I can't. Use the dragon bone sword? Well, it's not like you can't use it, but the swords on Thousand Sword Peak are the most effective against the monsters that appear there. So. We will enter this labyrinth, pick up weapons found inside it, and defeat monsters using the labyrinth's own weapons. And we have to abide by the labyrinth's rules regardless of whether we are in the vanguard or back row. Is that it? Asked Sem in place of Karen and Tiana, who were completely taken aback. Yes. Doesn't that put us at a disadvantage? I guess it doesn't. Tiana asked a question and disagreed with herself. Is your teacher good with anything besides magic? I've seen Master Bellocchio fight monsters many times, but always with magic. So I don't really know. Tiana responded with a shrug. What about Karen's sister? She's especially good at using breath, and she uses a spear, not a sword. So, she knows how to fight at close range. She was never very serious about training with the spear. But that was 5 years ago, I don't know about it now. Karen shook her head. They're fighting under the same conditions as us. And the monsters too, I guess. They use swords too. They do. There's a lot of Oni-type monsters, and some ogres too. It sounds like it could turn into a hard fight. Nick, speaking in practical terms, can we do this? Asked Sem, and Nick responded with a low voice. We can, but. Nick looked at Tiana, and all the others followed. What? Tiana said as she backed away with an uncharacteristically timid expression. We're going to have to train in a hurry. I also think it's better than doing nothing. I'll do some training as well. Said Sem. Yeah. Karen agreed. All we can do is train to you. Said Bond. And thus, they started making plans for Tiana's close quarters combat training. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 115, Tiana's School Days, Part 1. Tiana laid flat on the ground, covered in sweat. I can't. I'm too tired. You're going to get dirty lying there. Here's a towel. And some water. Leave me. Let me stay here for 5 minutes. Well, I don't mind, but... They were in the area behind Sea Anemone. Much like when Nick was practicing stepping, they explained their situation and borrowed this area to train. Tiana changed into more comfortable clothing to train with Nick, and they were being observed by Ada, who had become the bar's guard. Ada, you move pretty well for a noble girl. I'm an adventurer, you know. That's not all. You're getting pretty good with that wooden sword too. Next to Tiana was a wooden sword. It was a little longer than Nick's short sword, and made to be easy to handle. I learned the basics when I was in school, but I was never too into sword fighting. So you noble girls play with swords too? Lots of girls need to know how to defend themselves. Then why didn't you ever use that? I've only seen you carrying a staff. I figured if I can't use a sword well, I probably shouldn't use it at all. That makes sense, said Ada as she laughed. But I can't use that logic this time. Are you going after Thousand Sword Peak? It's not easy. I heard that's the hardest labyrinth for sorcerers. I guess everyone sees it that way. Tiana sat up as she sighed, and gulped down the glass of water she was handed. It's not gonna be easy, but you don't have to learn how to move like a warrior all of a sudden or anything. Just focus on not getting hurt, said Ada, and Nick nodded. If our objective was just to rank up, you could have sat this one out, and we could have hired someone more suitable just for this labyrinth. But Tiana shook her head. That sounds very tempting, but it won't work this time. It would if it wasn't for the duel. Nick crossed his arms and groaned with a serious look on his face. Ada looked at him, and asked a question. Where are the other 3? Training in the Goblin Forest. Karen, Sem, and Bond went to the Goblin Forest. Karen to get used to not using her race-specific techniques, and for Sem to work in the vanguard. Like Tiana, they were training with Thousand Sword Peak in mind. Hands-on training is nice. And you? You can say it directly. Ada seemed to be hesitant to speak, and Tiana urged her to speak her mind. You're not going to be very helpful, but if you train, you won't get in the way. I guess that's natural when you change someone's place in a party all of a sudden, right? I don't know about that. Tiana had something on her mind. It would be one thing if we were just conquering the labyrinth, but we don't know what they might do. He's your former master, right? Is he that strong? If it was just about magic, I wouldn't stand a chance. But you can't use magic there. Yeah. Tiana stopped briefly, before adding, but I don't think he's not going to do anything. He's definitely not the kind of idiot that charges into a labyrinth without preparing. You sound pretty sure of that. Of course, he's my master. Tiana smiled proudly. I guess that's the way it is, even though he's your opponent. Mom, come help me peel. I'm coming. Sorry, I have work to do. Ada's daughter called her, and Ada quickly went back inside. The two that were left rested with an awkward silence. Being so close to the summer meant the warm wind brought about a languid feeling, rather than a refreshing one. Nick could hear Tiana's irregular breathing very well. Ah. All right. We've done practice swings and mock battles. What now? Don't force yourself too much, Ada had a point. The objective here should be to be able to walk around Thousand Sword Peak and defend against the monster's attacks. Yes, but exercising is doing a good job clearing my head. Clearing? What, don't you usually do exercise? That's not it, it's just I've been feeling like I've stagnated. Stagnated? You? Nick asked with a look of surprise, and Tiana answered with a slight smile. I feel like I haven't been doing anything new lately. Doing the work that's in front of us is important, but so is doing different things once in a while. You say some meaningful things once in a while. Is that your master's influence? I guess. Mumbled Tiana as she looked up to the sky. The weather was nice, and laundry fluttered in the wind all over the place. Putting aside the wind and temperature, it was a refreshing sight. In a way, I am what I am thanks to him. When I was in school, poetry was always my favorite class. My ex-fiancé Alex. Well, thinking about it now, all I see is a coward, but he had talent for writing poetry, and a nice voice. He would have probably done well as a male idol. But as the eldest son of a barren family known for their sorcery, that path was never open for him. Even I, his fiancé, tried my hardest to study sorcery so as not to bring embarrassment to that family. That was why I started learning some magic, but it turned into more than that. I read the textbooks the school provided, took practical lessons, and by the end of the year got a perfect score on my exam. But I didn't think about studying beyond that. It was interesting seeing ice and wind appear from the tip of my staff, but although it was different from a bow or a sword, I started thinking about how it was a weapon. I took up magic not to become a sorcerer, but to become the wife of a sorcerer. I studied to go along with the family I would be marrying into, but I never once thought about using magic in actual combat. If I did find myself in a situation where I would have to wave my staff and cast a spell, it would probably be a very dire situation, considering I would be married and starting a family. A retainer rebelling, a terrorist attack, a war. I imagined that if the situation was bad enough for me to have to cast a spell, it would be bad enough for me to be unable to do anything about it. Because of this, I assumed it would be pointless to continue, and that there should be other things I should be studying, and more fun things I should be doing. The school I went to had a 5-year curriculum, but when we began the 4th year, we were supposed to choose a master, and under this master's guidance, complete graduation exams. If we completed them, we graduated. People that studied law wrote law-related essays, people that studied poetry created their own original poetry, and so on. I didn't really care. For me, school was just a transitory part of my life, and I didn't need anything in particular. When it came time to choosing my master, I cared so little I could have made my decision based on the result of a dice roll. But then, by my own volition, I chose the person who would be my master. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 116, Tiana's School Days, Part 2. When I started my 4th year in the Academy for Nobles, I was called to the teacher's room. There I was asked what I was studying, and to choose a master based on what my career path would be. Everyone had to choose a master in order to graduate, but school policy dictated that students were free to pick their master. Many students had to choose based on circumstances outside of school, and there were also times when some subjects had too many people and others too few, so sometimes the students' choices ended up not reflecting their true interest. For me, I had quietly decided to choose someone who studied sorcery, so almost any teacher would do. Many teachers in the academy were nobles specialized in magic, so there was plenty to choose from. This was why I went to many teachers' offices. Many were happy to see me, since my good grades would reflect well on them if I graduated. But Mr. Bellocchio treated me just like any other student. Tiana, you are not particularly interested in studying magic, are you? If that is the case, I recommend Professor Piari or Professor Dustin. He was very curt when I visited his office. Maybe not curt, maybe it was more complicated than that. He pointed me in the direction of people that he thought would be more suitable for me. A very normal piece of advice. However, I was a little conceited at the time, and took it as a provocation. Are you saying I'm not suitable to study here? No. Then why? It is just a matter of choice. If you wanted to work towards perfecting your magic for one reason or another, and other teachers that study magic would do our best to help you. But that is not the case, is it? Does that mean the teachers you recommended don't devote themselves to studying magic? No, they do, but their inclinations are different. Professor Piari and Professor Dustin are both great teachers and researchers. Professor Piari studies ancient chants and spells, and has deep knowledge of the arts. He can teach a lot of what should be learned. Professor Dustin places less emphasis on the results of the graduation exam, and more on making sure his students have a good grasp on the fundamentals. He does not believe that students should do whatever they want as long as they achieve passing grades in the exams. I implicitly recommend that students who have harsh obligations outside of school become his pupils. Some students who already have a job ready for them also do so to start learning about it as quickly as possible and get a head start. As frustrating as it was, the two teachers he recommended did seem right for me. I had never spoken directly with Professor Bellocchio, and yet, he knew all about me. I had no choice but to admit he was right. That might be true. I have been studying sorcery, but I will not be working as a sorcerer, and instead will be the wife of one. Is it better to start learning under someone who understands this? Being a sorcerer is not an occupation. I mustered up words loaded with frustration, and received a very unexpected answer. The look on my face was that of genuine surprise. There is such a thing as the job and title for sorcerers. There are sorcerers in the military, or even people like myself. As a sorcerer, I rely on my magic to study so I can guide students. I am a sorcerer in name and reality. But doesn't that make being a sorcerer an occupation? A sorcerer is a sorcerer even without the status and job. Whether you are someone's wife, noble or commoner, or not even affiliated to any country, a sorcerer is a sorcerer. Professor. What is it? So what is a sorcerer? Someone who strives to perform magic. That's it. What else? His response was so simple, it actually confused me. If you don't join a specific group, the army, or a research institute, you aren't accepted as a sorcerer. People can still call themselves sorcerers, but they're just self-proclaimed sorcerers, right? Finding employment is one thing, but joining a faction with loose regulations is easy. In fact, people were calling themselves and being called sorcerers long before this system was even in place. I guess, but sorcerers are just that, people who strive to perform sorcery, hone their skills, and study sorcery. I would go as far as to say that people without this motivation, who view magic as nothing more than a tool or daily necessity, are the ones who should not be called sorcerers. What he said was so extreme, I actually forgot my anger and instead worried for the person in front of me. If someone from the various sorcerer groups in this country heard him, he would be in deep trouble. Those groups were military organizations, much like chivalric orders. They used magic as a weapon or a tool, the complete antithesis of what Professor Bellocchio thought. But it struck a chord within me. So magic is different than a sword, spear, or bow. If you use magic to attack something, they are all the same. But if you reverse it. And then, a foolish-sounding noise echoed in his office. It was the sound of water boiling in a can. It was not one made by striking thin metal, but one made by melting and molding it, and it looked rough. It was most likely a magic item with some sort of mechanism to boil water inside it. When I boil water using magic to make tea, would you call it a weapon? It can be if you really boil it and throw it at a ruffian. Precisely. It all depends on how people see it, and how people use it. Professor Bellocchio moved the water to a teapot, and poured the tea himself. At that point, I noticed there were not any servants around, meaning I should be pouring the tea. Ah, Professor, that's... Oh, I should have asked. Do you dislike tea? No, that's not. But he did not seem to care, and handed me a slice of cake he got from the same shelf as the tea. What a strange tea party, if you could call it that. Ah. It's good. That's nice. Professor Bellocchio started drinking his tea. This was probably something he did every day, as he seemed used to using tea utensils. There were no signs that any servants were ever around. Now that I was feeling calmer, I looked around the room and saw piles of books and magic items, and I assumed not all of it was needed for his schoolwork. There were magic items that were obviously used to perform tricks and playing. Despite his serious expression, he liked to enjoy himself too. "You're very free, Professor Bellocchio. I think you're very unusual. Do you have any reason to believe you are not free?" "I don't really know, but..." I tried to tell him about myself, but stumbled. Watching this strange teacher and comparing him to myself, made me wonder what kind of life I should be leading. I was Alex's fiancée, there were no doubts there, and I had never felt any doubts about my life. It was a life given to me by my parents and family name, but I decided I was alright with that. The fact that I came to like my fiancée was also an expression of my own emotions. But could it be that having doubts, thinking about them, and exploring different possibilities was something acceptable? "Professor, is magic something free?" Professor Bellocchio responded with a slight, but definite nod. "Even if I don't get a job that directly deals with magic, or become someone's wife. As long as you strive to perform and learn about magic, you are a sorcerer." When I heard his response, I told him I wanted to be his pupil. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 117, An Unexpected Visitor. In the back alley behind Sea Anemone, Tiana spoke at length about the time she met her master. Sometimes she would laugh as she remembered something, and her unintentionally girlish expression soothed Nick's heart. My master wasn't really like a noble. He wouldn't rely on servants most of the time, and he would stay locked up in his office instead of going home from time to time. At some point I had to start helping him clean. That's a little different from the image I had of him in my mind," said Nick, and Tiana giggled. "He doesn't feel like a noble when he's amongst nobles, but he sure does here in the Labyrinth City. He's a little strange anywhere he goes. I don't dislike people that stay firm like that. He has always been an understanding person." Tiana sighed with some gloom on her face. Nick thought what Tiana said felt off. When he spoke to Bellocchio, he found him to be earnest and stubborn. Someone with a strong will, who would do anything to attain his goals. He did not feel like someone free and easygoing who placed much importance on the will of his students. "It is strange. Oh, I was looking for you. You're training here." That was when someone called out to Nick and Tiana. A sorcerer with frizzy blonde hair, who was Nick's friend, but also his enemy in this match. "Willie." "Hi Nick." Nick and Willie were not just adventurers, they were also both fans of idols. They had been going to Agate's concerts together, and at that point, it could be said they were friends. No hard feelings, right? I know this is turning into something kind of weird. It's fine. But moving from party to party as a helper is kind of a weird way to work. It can't be helped, 2 of our old party members got married and retired. Me and Marcus had no choice but to keep going as a duo. Willie shrugged. "So, are you here to scout out the enemy?" said Tiana sarcastically. "Yes, that's half of it." Nick and Tiana stared at Willie, not expecting him to casually admit it. "I'm mostly here to give you a message from Master Bellocchio." "Eh?" Nick became a bit nervous, but Tiana was not bothered. Instead, she asked a question. "Master Bellocchio. You call him that too?" "Yes. I've been telling him about what it's like to be an adventurer nowadays, and I asked him to teach me magic and he accepted." "I see. So we're both his pupils then." "It's a pleasure, big sister." "Big what? Who are you calling big sister?" "Everyone calls you that, especially the ones that like going to the dragon races and casinos. They say stuff I don't really get with respect, like, it feels nice to see her gamble and she's becoming a master at playing." Nick barely contained a burst of laughter. "Hey. Sorry. Tiana glared at Nick, who unconsciously apologized. Tiana sighed, before realizing something and starting to tremble. Does Master Bellocchio know about this? Ah. Willie struggled to answer, which was basically an answer in and of itself. Tiana was very troubled to hear this, and started mumbling and grumbling. Nick tried his hardest once again not to laugh, as he watched this noble girl behaving like a child having a tantrum. Willie, bewildered, cleared his throat. I get how you feel, but I think I should say why I'm here already. Ah, yes, your message. Master Bellocchio wants to meet you, Tiana. Just the two of us. He wants to hear how you're doing, and says you don't have to worry about him making any demands or anything. Really? Nick was suspicious. He also asked me to apologize to you. He said the way he got upset was unbecoming of his age. What a weird old man. He really is strange. Unlike Tiana, a former noble expelled from home, Bellocchio should still be a noble. He had no reason to apologize to Nick, especially considering the latter's rude attitude. He probably just did not care about those things to begin with. So, what are you going to do? Asked Willie. Tiana looked troubled, and peeked over at Nick. I think it's fine. We all got worked up, so I think it's good if you can sit down and speak calmly. But before a match? The match is the match. We just have to win. Said Nick, and Tiana giggled. I guess. You're full of confidence, Asked Willie. I've conquered Thousand Sword Peak a few times. I see. But keep one thing in mind, Nick. What? You were in Argus all martial arts, right? That means Thousand Sword Peak was probably not a big deal for you. That's true. Then you don't know how a party that relies on the back line is going to do it. Right? What are you trying to say? Willie smiled boldly at Nick's question. It's a warning. You're strong, anyone can see that based on what you guys have done, but still. Don't get careless or you might get the rug pulled from under you. Why that is a secret. Well then, Tiana, Master Bellocchio is staying in the lodging house of a magic research facility in the northeast. It's called Thunderbolt Company, and you'll know where it is when you get there. Said Willie before dashingly leaving. That Willie. What a bold guy. Acting all cool when just the other day he got tricked into buying unofficial idol merchandise. I don't want to hear about that. Tiana smiled and shrugged, thinking they were both hopeless. See you later. Be careful. Are you sure you don't want me to go with you? I'm not a child. Tiana followed the instructions and chose to go see Bellocchio by herself. She wiped the sweat off her body and changed into her usual robe, looking once again like a noble young lady. But thanks. I haven't been to the north in a while, so I'll bring you something from there. No, it's fine. It's not like you're going there for fun. Well, this sort of thing is right up Karen's alley. Nick saw Tiana leave, and realized he had nothing to do. The other members of his party were training in the Goblin Forest. The sun was still high in the sky, and Nick was not debauched enough to go to a bar or tavern so early. He would forget his moderation and self-restraint when it came to idols, but aside from that, he did not have many hobbies to pass the time on his own. I guess I'll go replenish my tools. He decided to do some chores. While laughing at himself for being a workaholic, Nick went to a place called Hammer Alley, that was filled with blacksmiths and stores where people could buy tools. If the southeast was a slum and the northwest was for the rich and the nobles, the southwest was for regular people. People not poor enough to worry about whether or not they would have food to eat the next day, but also not rich enough to always be thinking about how to spend money in politics. Merchants that dealt in relatively expensive items, workers making daily necessities, and workers working in fairly disciplined workplaces. There were stores aimed at adventurers near the adventure guilds, but many people burned themselves trying to take care of all they needed in nearby stores. Adventurers did not need qualifications as long as they formed a party. So, many merchants targeted their wallets. Wallets of those were not adept at making and handling money to live. Because of this, Nick tended to avoid the stores around the guilds, and instead made his way to Hammer Alley many times. He would not get ripped off or get involved with weird people there. Oh. What a coincidence. Do you want to have some tea with me? This meant that the person throwing this invitation at him was not just some weird person. Alice? It was Alice from the Order of the Sun, with her usual fresh smile. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 118, Katana User. So there are people going around asking questions about you and your party. There may be people out there with a grudge against you, so be careful. Ah. They ask questions like, when was your party created, what have you been doing, what labyrinths have he conquered, and what does he usually do? Quite persistent, don't you think? Why yes. What is that insipid reaction? I'm doing you a favor by telling you all this, you know. Nick was dragged by Alice to a nearby cafe. Alice then ordered tea and sweets and started warning Nick casually as she chatted. And I'm even buying you tea. Do people on your planet enjoy making women cry or something? Said Alice as she crossed her arms and sighed, looking as though she was taking offense with Nick's vague expression. No, that's not it. And I've heard about the way you've been using poor Karen, you know. I've heard that you made her stand in line to help you buy tickets for some idol's concert. I really don't think that's acceptable. That's not true. She just went there to give me some tea and... Never mind that, I think I know who's been asking questions about us. Alice seemed surprised, and Nick explained what happened with Karen's sister and Tiana's master, and how it led to a match. After hearing everything, Alice laid down, face first on the table. Oh. So it was a waste of time. Ah. And no, thank you for telling me. Sorry for worrying you. Alice quickly raised her head. Oh well, it's fine. That warning was pretty much just a gift of sorts anyway. There's something I want to ask you, do you know any adventurers that use a katana? Katana. Katana was a sword from the kingdom of Nozomi, an extinct country that existed in the south. Its blade was slightly curved. The beautiful design of its blade made it popular with people enamored by swords. It was also more effective against beast-type monsters than regular longswords. It was difficult to use, but surprisingly, popular both as a decoration piece and as an actual weapon. Well, the most famous one is 5th, the S-rank adventurer. The order is usually in contact with S and A-rank adventurers, so we know about them. What else? I want to know about other strong individuals in fishermen and pioneers. I guess I know a few, but guild employees and C and D rank adventurers probably know a lot more than me. It's fine even if it's information I've heard before. Alright. I can think of 5. Nick said as he counted his fingers and called the people from back when he was a part of all martial arts. Although they were all a bunch of liars and he had not thought of them in a while, Nick still felt a little nostalgic. He hadn't seen any of them since he formed Survivors. Well, I guess I'll see them eventually. Nothing, I'm talking to myself. First they're Kijui and Tansui, twin girls from the C-rank adventure party Ghost Hunt. Ghost Hunt. That's the party that specializes in evil spirits, isn't it? Yes. Those two use the katana. Then, there's Kyle, from the D-rank Shadow Edge. I don't know about him. He loves using a small katana, but I think the correct name is a ninjato. I see. Twin sword dancer Scott from Manhunt also used the katana. His skill with the sword is on par with C or D rank adventurers. Ah, yes, I know him very well. You do. The work that the Order of the Sun and the adventurers of Manhunt tended to overlap, so they were not very fond of each other. Therefore, when Alice spoke of him as if he was a friend, it felt strange to Nick. He's my little brother. Ah, now that I think about it, I forgot to thank you for helping him during the stepping man incident. Thank you. He is. Nick almost said they looked nothing alike, but held back. Still, Nick started to think that if the boorishness was removed from Scott's face, they may have looked alike. Hey! Don't just stare at a woman's face. Ah, sorry. I've invited Scott to come work with us, but he says he doesn't like to work with the court. What a bother, that man. That's. Most adventurers would be jealous or upset to hear he was given such an opportunity. But, although Scott was reckless, he did have a chivalrous spirit. The Order of the Sun could not be relied upon when it came to the abandoned area, so the fact that Scott wanted to defend people there made him surprisingly admirable. He's an interesting guy. Interesting? I guess I'm happy that you put it that way. He's a little rowdy, but he is strong. I don't dislike him. Thank you. Said Alice with a kind smile. Nick was entranced for a second, before changing the subject out of embarrassment. Ah, there's one more but. What? I'm sensing that it's not something that's easy for you to talk about. I had some trouble with him. Or rather, with them. My former party, all martial arts. Ah. The one led by Argus. Yes. Argus can use all kinds of swords, but there's also Garasso, who learned how to use the katana from him. He's also good at IAI. IAI. It's the name of a technique where one draws a sheathed blade and slashes with the same motion. It's very effective at taking down monsters in one strike. Ah. Alice took notes. But why are you asking? It's difficult to use, so by the time someone becomes good enough to use it, they're generally already strong. If you are thinking of recruiting them, I don't think they'd be good knights. I'm not scouting them. Then. Before Nick could ask again, Alice answered bluntly. My subordinate was killed with a clean slash, diagonally from the shoulder. Those words felt so natural, Nick could not process its meaning at first. But as he thought about it, and looked at Alice's quiet expression, he realized that there was a lot of anger behind it. My subordinate was after a group of bandits. They had a very skilled bodyguard, and judging by the wound, it was caused by a curved single-edged sword. That's. They probably have the Dragon King orb. They seemed very skilled. What about the armor? My subordinate was wearing armor on top of chainmail, but it was cleanly cut open. The cut was too clean. I would have been fascinated by it if I liked gruesome murders. Basically, she was looking for suspects. Despite her charming face, it seemed there was more to her than meets the eye, and a chill ran down Nick's spine. Everyone I mentioned except Scott seems capable of doing that. They all sound very strong. I can't imagine Kijui and Tansui doing it. Their main job is still being priests. Being a priest doesn't exactly guarantee innocence. Ah, are they by any chance your friends? No, that's not it. They're strangely blunt and... Wait. What? Most people I mentioned didn't pay nobles or anything to rise to rank D, they got letters of recommendation through recognition of their work. Bad behavior is one thing, but I don't think they would disgrace the people that endorsed them by commuting murder. At least, I don't think so. Nick grimaced. None of the people he thought of seemed stupid enough to dirty their hands with assassination, but from a technical sense, they were capable of cutting through someone's armor all the way to the victim's body. Kyle loathes bandits. He says he became an adventurer when his house was burned down by bandits, and he spent some time catching bandits over at Manhunt. Bandits wouldn't ever want to work with him. They most likely resent him. Then. Alice peeked at Nick's expression. That left the people that Nick knew all too well. The leader of all martial arts, Argus, and Garasso. Killing was taboo for all martial arts. We wouldn't agree to help someone that told us to stop a knight that was chasing them. I was told again and again not to use the skills I was learning for evil. So, you don't think they did it? At the very least, we weren't involved with those kinds of people while I was there. If we were, we wouldn't be worrying about money all the time. Hold on, as a knight, I can't let that one pass. Are you saying you'll help bandits as long as there are rewards involved? Said Alice sarcastically while Nick shrugged, realizing she was not being serious. In reality, there's no point in being involved with those kinds of people if there's no money involved or anything. So adventurers with plenty of money are suspicious? I wouldn't say that the culprit is an adventurer for sure, but I guess only an adventurer would be that good with the katana. Yes. Alice. Which one do you suspect, Argus or Garasso? What are you talking about? Alice was surprised, and Nick sighed as she tried to evade the question by drinking her tea. You don't have to try to hide it, I know that's why you're asking me. And if the Dragon King orb is involved, it's not like it has nothing to do with me. Exactly. But don't get me wrong, I'm not concluding it is an adventurer, it's all just a theory at the moment. It could also be a skilled fighter that wandered in from another country. In fact, I'm making sure that an adventurer didn't do it so I can start looking into it. I guess, theoretically, both of them could do it. Anyone that has seen them work would say the same. But assuming they did it, why, for whom, and what is their goal? I have no idea. I really don't think they're stupid enough to be hired by bandits. You're a nice guy. They expelled you, and you still won't say anything bad about them. Many would see this as a chance to get revenge. Nick was silent, and had a sour look on his face. Nick left all martial arts on bad terms, but he would never accuse them of being suspicious without any evidence. Garasso falsely accused him, so in a way, he deserved it, but Nick still thought it would be a betrayal of sorts. Both to his former partners, and his current party. That was a rude way to put it. Sorry. It's fine. Your colleague was killed, and you just want clues. So much so that you can't even imagine. Although Alice sounded very casual, Nick sensed something burning behind her words. Adventurers and knights are in an unfortunate business. You never know who you might meet, and when you might have to say goodbye. Yeah, I sorta get that. But, who knows how I'll feel if that happens to me. It's not the first time, but I'm not used to it. You're the leader of your party, so make sure you always do your best to prevent something like this from happening. Alice said as if she was talking to Nick, but he sensed that she was talking to her own reflection in the cup of tea. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 119, Extra Chapter, Bond's Scrapbook. There were a lot of trees in Labyrinth City. In places like the forest on the foot of the Five Rings mountain range and the regular, non-labyrinth forest to the north of the Goblin Forest, it was possible to get good quality wood. There was also a lot of afforestation in areas with few monsters. Because of this, not only were many buildings made of wood, but it was also used as raw material for many manufactured goods. One that stood out among them was paper. The Labyrinth City was also a commercial city where people, goods, and information went back and forth. Salt and seafood were taken from the seaside regions of the south and exchanged for irons from the mines in the north. Magic items and arms made from processed monster materials were taken to the capital to the west. Non-iron metals and rare goods from other countries were taken from the capital. Merchants worked day after day pegging the prices of iron, salt, and wood. That is why economic newspapers sell so well. People working the printers worked the machines day after day, covered in ink. Said Nick to Bond, whose ears seemed perked but was not really listening. Ah, fine. You know, it's not that interesting. Really? You like books, so I thought you'd be into this sort of thing. Well, I do not hate it, but I cannot use my calculation and analysis abilities for stocks or speculation. I see. There's plenty of shady ways to use them if you really think about it. By the way, you also cannot rely on my help when buying stock, that is also not allowed. I did think about that for a second. Oh well, we don't want to attract too much attention anyway. Yes, yes. I also said no when Tiana asked me to analyze Dragon Race's newspapers and almanacs. What was she doing? Apparently she bought a bunch of old issues of those newspapers cheaply because a journalist likes her. Her room is already packed full of stuff. She really should get a housemaid or something. She enjoys her hobbies a little too much, but then again, you should not be one to talk as well, right? I guess. But if you're not interested in economic newspapers, then what are you doing? Bond flipped through newspapers rapidly. He got his hands on a box full of old issues, and looked at every single one. I am scanning and preserving them. I was after the manga that comes as an extra, but I figured I might as well scan everything. Are you a kid? I am not a kid. Preserving culture is important. Paper burns away, and lithographs may seem eternal, but there is abrasion with every copy. I am not doing this for my own amusement. Alright, then tell me if you find something interesting. I can do that. This city should really have some sort of legal deposit. Said Bond as he stopped on an article. It was not very interesting for him, but he assumed Nick would want to see it. What? An idol scandal. I don't want to hear about that. It says she is suspected of supporting her ex. I said I don't want to hear it. Alright, sorry. There is no need to get so upset. It's good manners not to pry into an idol's private life. And I actually know about that one. So you're only pretending not to listen to it. I'm a bit interested, so I do touch on that kind of thing. But I pretend I don't know. It's taboo to bring up their personal lives when you meet an idol. What a complicated mental setup. Oh. If it's about idols again, I don't care. No, it is. Oh well, forget it. Bond saw an article from the previous month. It talked about how there was hope of cleaning up the abandoned area. It said that recently adventurers had been frequenting it and driving out pimps and con men, and that the spread of disease had been put in check. The residents had slowly been warming up to adventurers. It did not say what party started this, but Bond knew. I forgot, I promised Sem I'd go out drinking with him. You really should not go to every weird place he invites you to. It's not that weird. Last time it was a place aimed at beast people, and this time. It's a bar for excommunicated priests. How does he even find these strange places? I have no idea. You two cannot be helped. And you even have a certain societal prestige. HN. What did you say? Nothing. Just continue to stay the way you are. You sometimes say some weird things. Nick then got ready and left, and Bond went back to scanning and analyzing newspaper articles. He looked back on Survivor's adventures, and smiled. Now that I think about it, that time in the casino was said to be the work of a mysterious paladin. There should be articles about. Ah, here it is. I have to preserve this one as well. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 120, Teacher and Student's Conversation, Part 1. The rich lived in the northern area of the Labyrinth City, and it could be said that north and south were on opposite ends both geographically and financially. The north had many schools, sorcerers and researchers. It was common to see youths walking about wearing brand new robes. Tiana looked on at the busy streets through the window in the wagon she was riding, and felt a little sad about the distance she felt between inside and outside of the wagon, although she could say with confidence that her situation was not bad. Young lady, Thunderbolt Company is this way. Thank you. Tiana paid the driver of the ride and stepped down onto a big but empty street. On it, there was a building with aged bricks, and from the outside, Tiana could see a well-kept garden. This majestic environment made her feel nostalgic. It's like school. Mumbled Tiana as she approached the guard at the door. Excuse me. Yes. How may I help? The young guard was well educated and polite. I have an appointment to meet my master, Bellocchio. Can you please confirm it? Ah, so you are Miss Tiana. Understood, please come inside. The guard let her in without confirming who she was or asking further questions. Tiana was taken to a guest room, and sat on a comfortable cotton-filled chair. The wooden table in front of her had beautiful carvings, and the lamp above her was a magic item, so it illuminated without generating heat. Everything seemed very high class. If anything, it all seemed very fussy, so Tiana imagined whoever owned the place was a very strict and rigid person. Why is Master Bellocchio living here? Tiana asked herself, but it all soon became clear. There was a loud knock on the door. Come in. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. No, it's fine, stay where you are. Bellocchio is helping me with a few things. Good grief, I have so much to ask him, and now he's decided he's going to become an adventurer at his age. A woman wearing an extravagant outfit that Tiana could not quite tell if it was a dress or a robe came in, and started speaking quickly. Tiana was at a loss for words, as she expected to hear the calm voice of her master instead. The frustration over being caught off guard actually calmed her down, and she soon cleared her throat and smiled. I am Tiana, a disciple of Bellocchio Shrews. Thank you for the wonderful reception. The woman let out a sigh of admiration, and spoke to Tiana with a more restrained voice than earlier. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Minerva Erda, and I am the head of the Thunderbolt Company Research Institute. I've heard a lot about you from Bellocchio. You remind me of me when I was younger. Bellocchio has settled down since, but I bet he never even mentioned he used to be an adventurer. Tiana looked surprised. He used to be an adventurer. So he really didn't tell you. Can you stop talking about my past when I am not present? Tiana, still surprised, heard a familiar voice. You're late. Bellocchio entered the room sighing as he looked at a grinning Minerva. Tiana on the other hand was relieved. Continuing to talk with that woman by herself would have been exhausting. Your presence makes the kids shrink back. That was a long time ago. I'm not scary, am I? Tiana thought she really was not scary, but rather somewhat of an overwhelming presence. Obviously, she did not say this, and instead simply smiled. Well, I will leave you two alone, said Minerva as she left the room. A silence and solitary feeling typical of when someone noisy left filled the room. She is an old friend. So you used to be an adventurer. She even told you that? Sorry. Bellocchio shook his head with a light smile on his face. It's all right. I just do not like talking about my embarrassing past, but I guess I should explain. I want to hear about that too, but first of all, are you working here? Not really working, more like I am under their care. Because you're so busy with your work as an adventurer? Yes, because I quit once. I went all the way up to a high rank and had some achievements under my belt. I thought they would still be in the records, but I had to start all over from rank F. It is quite a bother. I thought for sure you were starting from scratch. I had no intention of fooling you. I wanted to talk about that as well when I called you. Perhaps given the contents of the conversation I should have gone to you to talk, but I find it somewhat difficult to move about. Also, Swason would have followed me, so it would have made it difficult to speak. So you are kind of like the breaks of your party. Tiana figured she understood the general atmosphere of her master's party. She thought gathering adventurers in this manner was amusing, and laughed. It sounds like a lot of trouble. Yes. Bellocchio smiled and nodded. Tiana felt as though the reservations she had been feeling were gone, and although their positions were now different, she felt she could now talk to him as she did before. Tiana fixed her posture, and started speaking about herself. I have something I need to say. What is it, Tiana? My carelessness put you and other teachers in a difficult predicament. If I had been more careful, you wouldn't have been forced to quit. I am really sorry. That is not true. Bellocchio bluntly denied what Tiana said. But, if anything, your troubles were brought about by lack of attentiveness on our part. I should be one apologizing. I was so focused on my research that I failed to see what was around me, and was foolish enough to think political turmoil had no relation with school. But that's. Also, after I was expelled from school, I was too busy thinking about my future to care about you. Your leader is correct, this was an error on my part. Bellocchio stopped and took a deep breath. You are more resilient than I thought. Perhaps it is imprudent for me to say this, but you look 100 times more cheerful and energetic conquering labyrinths and gambling than I expected. Tiana unconsciously smiled. Yes, I'm surprisingly stubborn. Objectively speaking, there was no point in trying to pin the fault on anyone. Bellocchio jokingly proposed they stop talking about it, and Tiana accepted. That was the sense of distance between a master and a pupil. But master, I have 2 questions. What? We've confirmed that we are both doing well. I'm an adventurer, but I'm still a sorcerer, so is there any point in trying to scout me? That is one question. What is the other? If you used to be an adventurer, why do you want me to quit being an adventurer? Said Bellocchio before answering. The answer is the same for both. But Tiana, I will ask you something that was difficult to ask in front of your party. Difficult. Tiana, is being an adventurer your life's goal? Are you doing it out of a sense of obligation towards your leader and your other partners for saving you, or do you wish from the bottom of your heart to continue being an adventurer for as long as you can? Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world. Chapter 121, Teacher and Student's Conversation, Part 2. Bellocchio asked Tiana if being an adventurer was her life's goal, which made her look back to the last few, turbulent months. She only knocked at the door of the Adventurer Guild because she needed money, but she met her partners there, and thought of it as the work of destiny. Honestly, I won't deny I only saw it as a temporary job at first. But now. I like being an adventurer, and I won't quit until I achieve our party's goal of becoming A or S rank, or heroes in this city. That is my intention, and I want to be here to see that day. Said Tiana as she looked directly at Bellocchio. Bellocchio respected his disciples' decisions. Even if he saw problems with them, he would warn, teach, and guide. Tiana remembered this, so she had no shame in who she was. She had the bad habit of gambling, and being an adventurer came with difficulties and prejudice. She felt bad over being the cause of her teacher's downfall, but also knew she could not continue living while looking back and carrying that with her. You're naive. But Bellocchio's answer was harsher than she expected. I will be honest. It does not seem to me like you are completely earnest. Tiana took offense to this. Wah. I'm working hard as an adventurer. I won't say that there isn't some sense of obligation too, but. Then why are you so passive? Passive. Would you say you are proactive in your work as an adventurer? Tiana nodded in response to Bellocchio's heavy words. Perhaps it was rude of me, but I took the liberty of looking into your party. Let's hear it. At first I wanted to make sure you were not being threatened or exploited by a villainous party, and was relieved to learn that was not the case. Yes. But you are still too naive. It is not a matter of strength or ability. You lack resolve. What do you mean? You, or rather, survivors have achieved remarkable things, but all you do is use magic. That is a sad thing to see. To a sorcerer, being called a magic user was the same as being called an idiot. That's not true. Then tell me, why do you not study labyrinths and the monsters that occupy them? You are proactive in the sense that you use magic to take down monsters and remove dangers at the 11th hour, but at your age, this is not enough to call someone a capable sorcerer. After seeing your behavior in Fisherman, I cannot say you strive to learn anything else. Your leader does all the thinking when it comes to what kind of labyrinths you will be exploring and what to do in them. All you do is follow. Am I wrong? WL. My leader is very knowledgeable. Nick, correct? He is the most experienced, but is relying completely on someone else's experiences the proper behavior of a sorcerer. To Tiana, it felt like she was punched in the head. He was right. Nick had the knowledge and the ability to make decisions during explorations, but that was all due to his experience exploring labyrinths. It was very useful and reliable, but in theory, his experience could not answer why things were the way they were. Sorcery was not just about cramming knowledge, it was about studying the world and everything in it, and solving its mysteries. Labyrinths and monsters are not directly related to sorcery, but it is also rare to find something that is not related at all. Labyrinths are filled with rich magic energy, and monsters use a different kind of magic energy. There is a lot you can discover if you do your own research, so why do you leave it all to your partner? You. He was entirely correct. Tiana was afraid of her master's eyes as he criticized her. Bellocchio was calm, meaning he calmly explained to her why she was completely wrong. This had a bigger effect on her than any sort of yelling. Master. What is it? It's true, I have been complacent. I've been focusing only on what's in front of me and making money. I've been thinking it was fine as long as I was making money, and forgot to pay attention to what lies ahead. Tiana had an excuse. Her number one goal was to get her life back on track. That was why Nick proposed they formed a party in the first place. She did not intentionally hold back on giving her opinion when they talked, but it was true that Nick was the one deciding their course of action and how they conquered labyrinths. However, Tiana now realized that Nick only had experience as a C-rank adventurer, and there would be times when his experience would not be applicable, especially since he had no experience with labyrinths higher than C rank. Tiana made two mistakes. The first was that she had gotten lazy, just as Bellocchio said. The second was forgetting to doubt her partner's words, like he told her to do when they met. Tiana felt embarrassed as she realized this. I am ashamed. I see. But master, can I ask one question? Go ahead, there is no need for reservation. You said being an adventurer is a transient and decadent work, so why are you trying to correct my life as an adventurer? Tiana felt deeply ashamed, but noticed something peculiar. To Bellocchio, it would be convenient if she quit, so why would he scold her for being lazy? Tiana was feeling regretful as she reflected on her actions, but this brought some calmness back to her mind. Yes, being an adventurer is a transient and decadent job. I have no intention of taking that back. Adventurers earn their daily income by exposing themselves to danger. I will not say there is absolutely no future prospects for adventurers, but they are slim, and it is a very inefficient way to achieve success in life. These words felt ironic, but there was no irony in his tone. He looked at Tiana with an earnest expression. Then you should have the resolve to survive in that environment. Tiana, you are your party's sorcerer. Your life is in your partner's hands, and theirs is in yours. You cannot be satisfied with simply casting magic, surely there is more you can do. Only I can do. You are free to perceive magic in your way. If you have no intention to use the power of freedom, knowledge, and imagination for your partner's survival, you should quit being an adventurer. Bellocchio was standing up and speaking passionately, before suddenly noticing this, clearing his throat, and sitting back down. So master, if I can show you my resolve as a sorcerer-adventurer, I can continue on as an adventurer. Yes. If you lack resolve, you need to be beaten back into shape, and if you are not up for this job, you need to look for a more adequate path for yourself. I can't tell what exactly it is yet, so you should show it to me with your sorcery skills. Tiana was taken aback. Did he go out of his way to propose a match because he wanted to express this? Was he always so overprotective? Thinking back, Tiana realized that although he bordered on being a misanthrope, he was always well respected by his pupils. He probably cared just as much for the pupils that graduated before her as well. Thinking about this, made Tiana feel even more guilty. Surely there were people that resented him as well, but with his personality, he was bound to get kicked out of the power structure. Tiana started thinking about what her and other pupils like her could have done. Understood. I will show you the results of my studies during our match. All she could do was meet his expectations. Adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world, Chapter 122, Teacher and Students Conversation, Part 3. So, is that all you have to ask? Asked Bellocchio, but Tiana shook her head. Can I take the opportunity to ask one more question? You still seemed determined, so, go on. Bellocchio smiled as he nodded. What kind of adventurer were you? I was an idiot, fitting of the words youthful enthusiasm. Tiana looked at the mature man in front of her with surprise on her face. You? I don't believe it. I was not a commoner, but I was a more or less neglected third son. I did not receive enough money for school expenses, quit school, and went on a journey. That is how I ended up in this city. Tiana was too surprised to respond. That was close to 20 years ago. Thankfully, I did learn some offensive magic, so I knocked on the door of new beads and became an adventurer. That's... well. Tiana was polite enough not to say it was just like what happened with her. However, Bellocchio saw through this, and smiled daringly. I was more interested in casinos than dragon races. I even spent all night playing cards. Ah, really? I know I am not one to talk, but try not to overdo it. Why, yes. Tiana was upset last time they met, but still, the mood was a lot calmer this time. They talked about their vices and felt closer. Tiana's master felt not just like a master, but also her senior as an adventurer. It was then that Tiana thought of something, and immediately asked what was on her mind. Why did you quit? Well. We could not keep our party together, which is no rare thing even till this day. My partners got hurt and retired or found more stable occupations. Before I knew it, I found I was not healthy enough to fight on the front lines anymore either. I could not push my body as hard as I did in my teens and 20s. Bellocchio said with a bitter smile, but there was some gloom in his voice. Party breakups were not always pretty. In fact, most tended to leave behind some bitterness. Worst case scenario, it happened due to death, and it was likely that Bellocchio experienced this as well. Tiana noticed the slight change in his tone, and felt this was very much relevant to her. Was Miss Minerva a partner from your adventuring days? We have similar backgrounds, and went on quite a few adventures together. Thinking back, she was probably my first pupil, but now, I am the one under her care. Ah, also, there are probably still records from her days as an adventurer. I reached rank C, but she went all the way to rank A. That's incredible. You can do as much if you are diligent in your training and studies, don't you think? Yes. Tiana nodded. She was not the kind of person to put on a front of modesty, and Bellocchio preferred it that way. Oh, now that I think about it. What is it? If you were rank C, that means you conquered Thousand Sword Peak, didn't you? Bellocchio let out a wicked smile. It was a good hunting ground. Even though you're a sorcerer. That will be your homework for today. How did I? Or rather, how do sorcerers conquer Thousand Sword Peak? Figure it out. Ah, and you should probably refrain from asking higher rank adventurers. Many do not know, and the ones that do will not easily tell you. It is an unwritten rule of sorts. Bellocchio ignored a clearly confused Tiana and stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. Master. I will give you a hint. Remember everything I taught you, and investigate the defining features of the labyrinth. What you taught me. Tiana, be interested in many things. Not just your sorcery, all sorts of things necessary to be an adventurer. If you do, you will reach the answer naturally. Tiana had many questions, but politely looked on as her master left the room. After Tiana left, Bellocchio visited Minerva's room. Minerva was simply concerned about her fellow pupil, and wanted to hear what they were talking about. Bellocchio sighed, but went along with his pupil's wishes. So, how is my fellow pupil? We won't know that until we see the results. How much did you teach her? Everything in the curriculum of the school for nobles, and some magic that is useful in actual combat. Ice, wind, and lightning magic, but also things such as enemy search. Are you sure you didn't plan for her to be an adventurer from the start? Minerva seemed shocked, and Bellocchio responded with a dejected, "Of course not. I also taught her other valuable spells such as freezing and magnetics. She should be able to find stable work with what she can use." Ah. She sounds like a prodigy. I was in my mid-20s when I was finally able to use that. And yet, Tiana still became an adventurer. It must be quite harsh for people attempting to find employment nowadays. Minerva felt awkward as she heard this. Ah. I'm sorry. Apparently she submitted an application to work here, but was rejected during the resume screening phase. Minerva. No, I mean, we reject most people without a letter of introduction. And also, it happened right after the coup d'état in the Magic Empire. The new system has restored order, but there were many sorcerers fleeing here at the time. There were so many people seeking employment, and so many resumes coming in that I couldn't look at all of them individually. Ah. If only it was 2 or 3 months later. The situation would have been different. Good grief. Minerva saw the mixed feelings on Bellocchio's face and tried to cheer him. She seems well. Maybe it was in her nature all along. To be an adventurer. To love freedom. Bellocchio accepted these words and offered no response. Freedom was a rare attribute. Tiana loved and was loved by freedom. Bellocchio thought resigning oneself to being the wife of some dim-witted noble was strange, but continuing to move forward freely also brought about a sense of danger. As a master, Bellocchio felt he needed to look into this more deeply. Do you think she can conquer Thousand Sword Peak? Their party is very much capable of conquering it, and even go beyond rank C. I have the feeling they have an ace up their sleeve. So, to conquer it. It will be a matter of whether or not she discovers how it works. I'm sure she will be fine. Did you tell her about the magic sword? Bellocchio responded with a light smile while shaking his head. No. No. Whether or not one uses it is the turning point of that labyrinth. Wrong, it is not a matter of using it or not. What matters is whether or not one realizes the technique to use magic without letting magic energy leak. What to do and what is necessary. Knowing these two things makes superficial tricks not a problem. Superficial tricks. You know someone that can do that can easily find a place in a B rank party. Good grief, that poor girl has a harsh master. Minerva shrugged. Well, it will be fun seeing how it turns out. I am certain she will discover something.